Yesterday morning at exactly 8:30 a.m., the Montreal Canadiens announced a 2-year contract extension for one of their players. We'll get to that and how it affects things going forward. Yesterday night, the Montreal Canadiens played their fourth preseason game in Ottawa, and despite having a 4-2 lead, the Montreal Canadiens lost again for the fourth time in 4 preseason games. But I guess it doesn't really matter, does it? Because it's preseason. What is more important is who played well, who may have won a spot yesterday, who played okay, who didn't, and did anyone lose a spot with their performance last night? That, and we'll talk to you about the new format and the big announcement that we made last night at La Cage de Carry on Rue des Jockeys. The Sick Podcast is about to get a whole lot sicker starting in just over 1 week from now. It's Sunday morning. I'm Marinaro, and I'm going to introduce our guest today. He is, yours truly, Tony Marinaro. The Sick Podcast is coming up.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro. The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
And now a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Sports entertainment like no other. Brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense by nature. And La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you went back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you.
Good Sunday morning on Sunday, October 2nd, and welcome to the Sick Podcast. Marinaro. All right, okay, so yesterday morning at 8:30 a.m., the Montreal Canadiens announced a 2-year contract extension for this guy. And there you have it. Canadiens signed goalie Jake Allen to a 2-year contract extension, $7.7 million. All right, okay, so here's the deal. In Marinaro's world, Marinaro would not have signed Jake Allen. Not because Jake Allen's not a good goaltender. Marinaro thinks Jake Allen's a good goaltender. As a matter of fact, Marinaro thinks Jake Allen is a great team guy. Marinaro thinks Jake Allen is a great leader. Marinaro thinks Jake Allen is the type of player, goalie, and person that every team in the National Hockey League would want to have. But Marinaro is all in on the rebuild. He's actually disappointed that these 4 preseason games aren't 4 regular season games and that the Canadiens aren't 0-4 in the regular season. Jake Allen is a competitor. He's a gamer. He's a fighter. If he's going to play 50 games this year and the backup is going to play 32, for all 50 games, he's going to fight, he's going to compete, and guess what? The Canadiens are going to end up being in games that they're probably going to have no business being in if it wasn't for Jake Allen. That's the part of me that didn't want the Canadiens to sign Jake Allen. That's the part of me that wanted the Canadiens to trade Jake Allen. The part of me that wants the rebuild. Jake Allen plays the way Jake Allen can play. And if Jake Allen plays 50 games or so, Jake Allen is going to end up stealing points for the Montreal Canadiens. If he's going to steal points for the Canadiens, instead of finishing 4th last, they may finish 8th last. And ultimately, when the lottery comes around, that's going to affect their ability or their chances of getting a better pick in the draft. That's where I stand on that. This contract is fully deserved by Jake Allen. Every team in the National Hockey League would want to have Jake Allen at an extension of $7.7 million. He deserves it. He's a good goalie, a good person, a good leader. I understand the Montreal Canadiens for doing what they did. They wanted to reward someone who wants to be here. They wanted to reward someone who likes it here. They wanted to reward a good player. They want to put a goalie that's very good in front of them so that it won't negatively affect the confidence of their defense core, of their team, of their group, of some of their young players. You don't want to throw in the towel. You want to build a culture that's going to fight and a culture that's going to be competitive. So I understand all that. I don't think it's a bad signing. Once again, for the reasons I told you, it's not something that I would have done. But in the end, in the next year or so, we're going to find out if, or next couple of years, we're going to find out if I was right or if I was wrong. But ultimately, I don't have a problem with it. It's just the difference of, I think, where the Canadians want to go is where I want to go. I just think we see it a little bit differently as to how to get there on only this issue, because other than that, I think we get along on many respects. All right, okay, so that was that. That was at 8:30 yesterday morning. We got Jake Allen out of the way. The Canadians played their fourth preseason game last night in Ottawa, and this was their starting lineup. All right. Owen Beck in between Jonathan Drouin on his left, playing in his first preseason game, and Mike Hoffman on his right. Evans centering Pitlick and Armia, which could very well be the fourth line this year. Maybe yes, maybe no. Massar with Pezzetta and Ylonen, and Stevens, Richard, and RV Pinard. So, the third line, I think, will not be in the cards this year. I think Michael Pezzetta will be an extra. The fourth line will not be in the Canadiens lineup this year. Drouin and Hoffman, we're going to figure out who they're going to play with as the puzzle, we start putting together the pieces of the puzzle here. And once again, the Evans line could probably be a line. Matheson and Barron could probably be a duo. Gooley and Weidman, Harris and Leskinen, and in goal, Caden Primo. All right, so let's go to Caden Primo if we can. From one goalie to another, he has not done enough in camp to convince that he is a guy that is ready for the National Hockey League. Yesterday, he stopped 29 of 34. It's a save percentage of .853. There's a couple of shots from way out that his lateral movement, in my opinion, was not good enough. He showed a couple of nights ago when they lost at home to the Winnipeg Jets that he has a fault in his game, and that it's his inability to hug the post and keep hugging the post. It seems like he doesn't hug it as well as he should, and players are able to beat him by whacking away at loose pucks because he's not hugging that post the way he should. Far from being a goalie expert, because I'm not, but Caden Primo, I think it's safe to say, is going to need more seasoning in the American Hockey League. And if they bring him up and they play, it could burn his confidence. Now, I would have been willing to live with the confidence being burned a little bit once again if it would have going to help with the rebuild. And if not, you know what? I would have tried to find another goalie the caliber of Samuel Montembeault and have Montembeault with that goalie be the duo for the Canadians, because if the Canadians are going to get subpar goaltending, well, then logic's going to prevail and they're going to finish where a lot of people expect them to finish, which is near the bottom. Having said that, once again, they signed Jake Allen. It is what it is. You are watching live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And for us to feel the love, we ask you to comment SICK, SICK, if you're watching right now. All right. Oh, speaking of which, I should have done this before. Let me do it right now. And I'll actually do it while we're live. Why not? What's the difference here? Okay. So the SICK podcast, once again, is going live on Twitter. And it gives me an opportunity right away. Hold on a second to actually retweet what's going on so that you can watch it live right now. Okay, mission accomplished. It's done. Tell your friends about it. And if you're watching us and you listen to us, pardon me, on Apple or Google or Spotify or other social media apps, leave us a 5-star review. We love to read your comments. Thank you very much for that. The SICK podcast, of course, is brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense by nature, the beer for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark. And La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the Cup back in 1993, it's time you go back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you. I was at La Cage de Carrie last night on Rue des Jockeys. We made our big announcement, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes. You probably know by now because you probably were there. And if you were, we thank you so much for showing up and your support. And if you weren't, you probably heard about it already on social media, on Twitter or on YouTube or on Facebook or whatever, but we're still going to get into it a little bit later on, as I want to talk to you about this game. Early on, it was Drouin to Beck off the post. Would have been nice for him to score a goal. Unfortunately, Owen Beck was his worst night in the faceoff circle. Last night being the best faceoff man in the OHL. He had a faceoff percentage of only 41%. Pitlick blocked a shot from Zaitsev. He went on a 2-on-0 with Jake Evans. He made it 1-0 for the Canadiens. Matheson later on gloved it down, brought it down, lobbed it to Evans, who banged it home. That made it 2-0 on 2 goals by Jake Evans. Ottawa narrows the lead. Ylonen to Pitlick, a la Mike Camilleri with the left knee on the ground, and the one-timer makes it 3-1 for the Canadiens. Pezzetta later in the game finds Justin Barron pinching in, and his quick wrist shot makes it 4-2 for the Canadiens, and then their lead evaporated. Ottawa made it 4-3. Ottawa made it 4-4, and on the power play, Ottawa, who finished the night with 3 power play goals, by the way, Alex DeBrincat scored his second goal of the night, the game winner in overtime. The Ottawa Senators win by a score of 5-4 in OT. The Senators outshot the Canadiens 34-16. In the face-off circle, it was 62% for Ottawa. It was 38% for Montreal. And the Ottawa Senators went 3 for 5 on the power play. The Canadiens went 0 for 3 on the power play. The big winner on this night for the Canadiens, the guy who may have solidified himself a spot, because I have to tell you, I was worried with the way he had played up until last night. I thought he wasn't able to get away from the forecheck. I thought that he was not overly physical and bumped off the puck easily. I was worried about Justin Barron, who yesterday played his best game that he's ever played as a Montreal Canadian, dating back to last year when they acquired him in that trade for Arturi Lehkonen with the Colorado Avalanche. Barron played 14 seconds shy of 20 minutes last night. He had 1 goal. He had 1 assist. He had 2 points. He was a +3. He looked very good, and it is quite possible that the duo of Matheson and Barron are a defense pairing when the season starts for the Canadiens, when they take on the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday, October the 12th. And that's about it. 4 preseason games, 4 losses. Jake Evans had a couple of goals. Jake Allen got a 2-year contract extension yesterday morning. Caden Primo, .853 save percentage last night, needs more seasoning in Laval. And once again, the lines that we saw yesterday, that third line won't play as a line together with the Canadiens. Pezzetta could be an extra. That fourth line won't play either. Several of the defensemen won't play either. And chances are the 2 goalies that you saw last night will not play for the Montreal Canadiens either, unless, of course, there's an injury to either Allen or Montembeault. And at that point, you will see Primo, unless they want Primo to play a lot of games in Laval during that point. And at that point, you will see Poulin. All right, okay. So we're going to be able to talk Montreal Canadiens much more going forward. Yesterday, we made an announcement. We made an announcement that the Sick Podcast, starting Tuesday, October 11th, will run weeknights from 10 p.m. or starting at 10 p.m. It could end at 11 p.m. Who knows? It might even end a little bit later. And we listened to everything you had to say. We've been going at this for, I think, less than 2 years. We've experimented with a couple of things. We believe the podcast has been getting more and more sick with each and every day. The reason why we ask you to comment is because we appreciate your feedback. We value your feedback. I've always wanted to be a sports radio host who gave the people what they wanted and what they wanted to hear. I didn't do the show for me. I did it for them. I didn't do the show with what interested me. I did the show for what interested them. There were a couple of exceptions, of course. Maybe I tried to talk soccer a little bit more than some of you wanted. I really wanted you to love that sport. And I think today, it's mission accomplished, because I think a lot more Montrealers and a lot more people listening and watching love soccer more than they did before I started talking about it. And you know what? I sang some English songs every now and then, and some of you wanted me to end it, but I really love singing. The beauty of the way this podcast is going to go down now, when I said we value your feedback and we listened to all your comments, is the comments we received were this: Tony, we want you on more regularly. Tony, we want you on longer. Tony, we would love if you could take calls. Tony, we'd like to see a few more collaborators. I mean, the list goes on and on. So this is what we're doing. We're going to go live once again, weeknights, throughout the entire hockey season, starting at 10 p.m. Of course, as you know, with most Canadians games starting at 7 p.m., they will likely end at around 9:40 or 9:45 p.m. So when we start at 10 p.m., it's going to be within 15 minutes of the game ending. Over the last 15 years that I hosted a radio show, starting at 10 a.m., when the Canadians used to have a great performance or a terrible performance, my Twitter messages would read, "Is it 10 a.m. yet?" And your Twitter messages to me would read, "Is it 10 a.m. yet?" Because we had to wait until 10 a.m. the next day for you to hear me. Now, you won't have to wait very long. I grew up idolizing Guy Lafleur as a hockey player, but in sports radio, above all, the late Ted Teven. I used to listen to his show that used to start at 10 p.m. I used to have the yellow Sony Walkman that would lock. And for those of you who are around my age, you know exactly what I'm talking about, with those yellow earphones that would go into your ears, okay? Well, today, Walkmans are a thing of the past, and the headphones I use are these white Sonys right here, okay? And I would listen to Ted Teven. And one night, as his show was ending in the early hours of the morning, Ted Teven said to Tony from LaSalle, "You really have the goods to make it in this business." And he inspired me. And I've gone on to have a 20-year career in radio, and that career is continuing now with collaborations on radio, on BPM Sports, 91.9 FM in Montreal. I'm on just past 8 a.m. in the morning as a collaborator on Jean-Charles Lajoie's show called Premier Compteur, 4 weeks in, and the results have been just as good as I thought that they would be, to tell you the truth. The feedback's been incredible, and it's going really, really well. The downloads have been incredible, and I get to join Jean-Charles on his GC show at TVA Sports Monday to Thursday, which goes from 5 to 7, and I make an appearance with him at around 5:29 p.m. or so. So I do about anywhere between 25 to 30 minutes of radio and TV combined with Jean-Charles. And a lot of you have been asking to hear me again in English and to hear me with more consistency and to hear me for a longer period of time. For the last year and a half, pretty much, I was recording the podcast 3 days a week. The recordings would last anywhere between 20 and 35 minutes. And we would go live on Sundays. Now, with the new format, we are going live Monday to Friday, starting at 10 p.m. And that's your schedule. And yes, we will take calls. I'm all set up for it here in my studio with all the equipment. Thank you to Erickson for setting us up in that regard with a mixer board and a microphone. And we're about ready to go with that. So I look forward to it. The big difference that you're going to see is that some of the calls are not only going to be audio, some of the calls are going to be video. So if you used to get a kick of Peter from Côte Saint-Luc calling my show and he and I singing Felicita, we are now set up so that if Peter calls me, you'll actually see Peter and see me singing Felicita. So some of the calls will be video. The reaction after the Canadiens games is going to be instant and immediate. You're not going to have to wait until 10 o'clock the next morning. And I've always felt, to be honest with you, even though I had a tremendous amount of success with a 10 a.m. time slot, I always felt that my personality was more suited for 10 p.m. than it was for 10 a.m. I worked a 10 p.m. slot for the longest time. I did 10 a.m. radio for 15 years. In the first 10 of those 15 years, I was actually hosting or co-hosting the Habs post-game show as well. So I'm no stranger to nighttime radio. I love it. I relish it. And my goal is to make the Sick Podcast the place where you will tune in after every Montreal Canadiens games between Monday and Friday. And even when the Canadiens aren't playing, you'll be able to listen to the Sick Podcast. You told me you missed my radio show, but you love my podcast. So what we're going to be doing with the new format is giving you a hybrid. It's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be a podcast that will sound like a radio show, kind of look like a TV show, and take all the calls and all the video and audio, all the audio, and have all the collaborators. So we're also going to be talking all sports. So what'll happen is, for all you Montrealers who want to hear me talk about CF Montreal after their big 1-0 win over DC United yesterday, going forward, I'll talk about CF Montreal if that's the big story. And if it's not, you know what? I'll still spend a couple of minutes. The Alouettes and their big 25-18 win over the Edmonton Eskimos yesterday. I'll talk about the Alouettes if that's the big story. Now, for the most part, the Alouettes season and CF Montreal season, they have a couple of months to go. It's winding down, of course, and the Canadiens are about to start their regular season next week. So there is going to be a lot more Habs talk for sure. But I'm not going to neglect the other Montreal sports teams. I'm not going to neglect the big sports issues. I will talk about them. And if interviews is what you like most about the podcast, well, what we're going to do is, when we're going to later on upload it to all the social media channels, you'll be able to get your interview on one clip, and you'll be able to probably get your calls on another clip, and you'll be able to get the other sports talk on another clip. That's the way we're going to handle it. We believe we're going to make everyone happy. Once again, we listened to all your messages. We read all your messages. We're going to give you everything you ever wanted on this podcast. When I left the radio station after 20 years, and contrary to some reports that I left for French radio or French television, I will tell you right now that when I handed in my resignation at 12 p.m., I had no deal signed with radio, and I had no deal signed with TV. I walked away to concentrate on my podcast. Later, I signed with radio and TV. They gave me an amazing opportunity and an amazing platform. And with the opportunity they gave me, it only involved less than 30 minutes per day. It was not going to get in the way of my podcast. I'm loving my podcast. I'm loving my move to French radio. I'm loving my move to French TV. I know some English-only speaking listeners got a hold of me and said, damn, I miss you. And you know what? I miss you too, really. But at the same time, I gave you 20 years. I gave you 20 years. And for some who are upset at me saying you went to the other side, I didn't have anything signed when I left the radio station. I left for a reason. And if people are smart enough, they'll know what it was. Now, having said that, I'm really happy to be once again on French radio and French television, BPM Sport and TVA Sport. There is no other side. Some believed, he went to the other side. We're one side. I want to be able to bring us all together. Sports has no language. It's not French. It's not English. It's all about heart, soul, and passion. I want to be able to bring everyone together. And I think I'm doing that. Now this is perfect. French radio, French TV, my English podcast, and to all my French listeners and viewers as well, you are welcome to call the podcast. You are welcome to message the podcast. And it's not because it's an English podcast that I'll refuse your call in French. When I was working French radio, if someone couldn't express themselves in English and they would call and they would speak to me in French, I would handle the call in French. We're not French. We're not English. We're not Italian. We're not Spanish. We're not Portuguese. Sports fans, we're one. We're sports fans. For now, I'm going to introduce my hockey collaborators on the Sick podcast. Later, I'll introduce the other collaborators at a later date that will join us, that will talk other sports. But without further ado, here's a video we put together of some familiar faces that you will see throughout the entire season, draft, free agency, etc., on the Sick podcast. Here it is. All right, Chris Latournette. I want to talk to you about him. Chris owns a sports cards store in Vaudreuil, and it's fantastic. And sports cards, of course, for all you aficionados out there, you know that some cards, some rookie cards, all sports, some of them are going for thousands of dollars. Some of them are going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Throughout the entire season, Chris will educate us on sports cards, player cards, which ones are going up in value, which ones are going down, which ones to keep an eye on. And we'll probably even open some packs up live on the show. I welcome him to the show. I'm really, really happy. There are times I'm going to be away. It's going to happen. I might take a couple of weeks off at Christmas. I might take a couple of weeks off in the summer, maybe even a month or two. But if I do, the show will be in very good hands because Sick Media is proud to announce that Matthew O'Hain, no stranger to sports talk, will be filling in every now and then on the Sick podcast with Tony Marinaro. So he's coming on board as a part-time host. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let's go back to Sammy for a second. Sammy, put yourself up on the screen. Is Sammy there? Sammy's there. Sammy and Agnello. Once again, no stranger to the program. I've talked about them before. But Sammy Cavallaro, born at 9 months old, diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. His parents were told he wasn't going to make it by the age of 2. Today, he's 21 years old. He graduated from John Abbott Business Administration, Sports Marketing. He has his own small social media company. He has over 6.5 million followers on Instagram. He's built an empire with the Sick Podcast because the Sick Podcast now, Agnello, if you can, the Sick Podcast is in Montreal with Tony Marinaro. Where else is it?
It's in Chicago, Detroit, Arizona, Pittsburgh, and Toronto.
Wow. So it's in Montreal and 5 other cities. Is that correct?
Yeah, 6 cities total.
So now it's in 6 cities total. All right. This was, Sammy looked into a crystal ball 2 years ago when he asked me to start this thing up in Montreal. He showed me what the big picture was, and the big picture is starting to unfold in front of our very own eyes. And Sammy, I told you when I told you I was on board, I told you the Sick Podcast was going to get sicker and sicker every day. Yeah. We had a great event last night. We're going to have some great shows going forward. And when the Canadians play the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday, October 12th, minutes after that game is going to be over, I am going to be on live on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. If you haven't subscribed to our Facebook group page yet, please do. If you haven't subscribed to our Twitter handle at The Sick Podcasts, please do. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. It's absolutely free. And what will happen is, by subscribing, the second we go live, YouTube will notify you that we are live, so you're not going to miss anything. And once again, the show is going to start Tuesday, October 11, one night before the Canadiens open up their season versus Toronto. I wanted to fill you in. That's why I did this today on this Sunday afternoon. For those who weren't there at La Cage, I wanted to do this for you. For those who were there at La Cage, I want to say thank you very much for coming, all of you, family, friends, sponsors, and to all of our sponsors who are with us right now, and to the next couple who are set to join us in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for coming along for the ride. It's going to be a beautiful one. And I met Nelson yesterday. Nelson, who owns his own travel agency, was very, very nice. He brought me a little gift. He told me he came down from Richelieu. He drove an hour and a half to see me because there was all kinds of traffic. And he brought me this beautiful pillow that I can just, with my hands, I could pump air into it. And it's a travel pillow, and I can use it to travel. I'm actually going to be traveling in the next couple of days here, but I'll be back when the Sick Podcast starts. So, Nelson, I'll be using that pillow. And I said to them, I said, Nelson, what is it you like about me? And he said to me, he says, I like everything, but you want to know what he likes most? I'll tell you what he told me. What he likes most is when I say, I'm Marinaro. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Nelson. Have a good day, everyone.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by 8.6, Intense by Nature, and La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the cup, it's time you went back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you.